So, Peter, I was thinking the other day that it's like the mind is always doing a sort of research, right? Where it sort of posits a question like, what if I think such and such is a thing? What experience will it give me? Right? Would you say that that's accurate?
Well, it's one to describe it. You can't really say what happens. You can say that what we think of as the mind is unceasingly doing what it does, which seems to involve generating and orienting towards concepts and interpretations, and then simulating those in various ways in terms of what it would be like if they were actual.
So, an artist, you could say, goes through the same sort of process, but he knows that he's imagining, right? Or
not necessarily. I don't know.
No.
I mean, it's the same process. Think of it as it's not really a process because it's not connected to anything. It's just an ongoing. It's an ongoing portion of reality.
Well, it's a different sort of engagement.
What's different from what?
The way an artist will engage with his or her work, and the way like a person just daydreaming or going about their lives will engage with the world of their thinking.
Maybe not, but so what? I mean, I don't understand.
Well, what's the point? Yeah. I kind of wonder to what extent there's a sort of more substantial noticing that's happening in art, right? So like there's yeah.
It seems like more substantial expression than you can't know what anybody's noticing, but sometimes it's art.
Mm-hmm. Noticing occurs within the perceiver, within the experiencer. And an artist may or may not be recognizing, noticing when they're doing art. Someone viewing what they think of as art may or may not be recognizing and noticing when they're viewing it, and so on and so forth.
But
noticing is recognizing the presence of actuality, which is the unlimited actual experiential field, which is always present, and within the context of which, of course, everything whatsoever seems to take place. So it has nothing to do with what the point of focus is, whether one's creating art or viewing art, or cooking or walking around or meditating or, taking drugs or whatever. It's not about the explicit focus of supposed activity. It's about seeing the actual context within what's being thought of as activity is occurring, which can happen at any time with anything, with any kind of activity or non-activity, because it's always exactly the case.
And it can happen with any body. It doesn't take
Of course.
any special
Of course,
person to do.
of course. It's a matter of recognizing the relevance and power and importance of it. That's where the artfulness comes in. That's where the spirituality comes in. Everyone is always noticing all the time, but it's in most cases seemingly it's being written off as just, well, of course I'm experiencing, but what's happening? So experiencing is just taken as a valueless given, just a constant in the equation that has no it has nothing in itself. It's just the essential ingredient for it, and something else that is important to be happening. But in fact, it's exactly the other way around. And that's the recognition of that is what this is all about. Is what yoga consists of. Recognition of the power and the transcendental nature of experience itself. And then what's happening in experience becomes irrelevant, essentially. But typically people are, 180 degrees in error in terms of what they're approaching as it being important or as being relevant in terms of what's happening.
In artistic practice, there's at least an engagement with sensual reality, right? And like a richer, fuller engagement with sensual reality. Maybe
yes, maybe no. It may not be any richer or fuller than someone else's engagement.
And there's okay, maybe not.
I mean, you may be sitting around reading surfing Facebook and having a really intense sensual engagement, with all the colors and the lights and the sound and everything, or not, right? It's not about the activity, and it's not about the specific seeming medium. It's about the fact that any and all activity takes place in the context of the experiential field and actually consists of nothing but that.
And in artistic practice, there seems to be a diminution of a sense of self, at least in the moment of engaging in creation.
But again, maybe you're fantasizing an artistic engagement, and you're fantasizing that it is that certain way. If you look at the real-time actuality of any particular artist at any moment engaged in art, what they are and the way they're oriented to it is who knows what. And the important thing is always direct your attention to the real-time experience right here, right now. And these sort of more abstract questions about what different activities are, what someone's doing, or what this or what that, are intrinsically leaps off into fantasy, and they're unnecessary. Because anything that's worth finding, you find right here, right now. So if you want to know about the activity of mind, look at mind right here, right now. You don't need to look at the mind of some artist somewhere else doing something in your imagination. But as powerful as actuality, and actuality is always right here, right now. And actuality is also what's clear. Fantasy will always be hopelessly muddled. It never straightens itself out. It never becomes anything other than a confusing mess. Whereas actuality is completely clear and obvious.
how do I know when I'm just in the grip of delusion?
You're always in the grip of delusion, but delusion has no grip, so it's not important. So it's not, delusion is ongoing. The activity of mind is ongoing. All these things are ongoing. But these things are not really anything. They are just, tiny textures within this actuality that is right here.
For you personally, in your experience, now as opposed to when you were 20 years old, when you were 20 years old, the difference was that your attention was more focused on the mind's fabulation and sort of turning towards it.
I don't know if I'd use those words, and essentially what you're asking is, the answer would be yes, but I wouldn't put it that way, because it's not a matter of attention. My attention still these days is by and large focused on whatever it happens to be focused on. I may be thinking about something or reading something or whatever, but there's a constant awareness of the field of experience within which all this focusing and so on and so forth is occurring.
Yeah, some people talk about abiding in awareness.
But everyone abides in awareness. It's a matter of recognizing that fact. I mean, where are you? Here you are. You're always abiding right here where you are. Where is here? If you look for yourself, aside from here in Pam's, the answer is, where are you? Where are you always? Where is here? What does here mean? And I don't mean in the abstract, or to answer the question. I mean, just feel where is here? What is here? What is this here? And it's quite palpable and obvious. And of course, you're very, very familiar with it, because it's always that, exactly. You've never been anywhere else. And even if you get distracted or get caught up in focusing on something, or get caught up in emotional reactivity or something, the here doesn't go anywhere. And it doesn't become any less here. It doesn't become any more here when you notice it. But recognizing that think of it as a hierarchy, recognizing the hierarchy of that here is where everything comes from. So here is power. Here's the top of the pyramid. Here is the foundation of reality itself, and everything emerges from here, emerges within here, and disappears back within here. But here itself never goes anywhere. So here is the really powerful, presence is the really powerful actuality. And then all these little circumstances and coming and going, and activity of mind, or changes of focus, or emotions, or distraction, or delusion, or whatever, all of that is, first of all, if you look, you can't tell what it really is, but whatever it is, it occurs within this that is here, appears mysteriously within it, and disappears equally mysteriously back into it. Always, everything. But here doesn't ever come and go. And that's the powerful thing. That's the important thing. That's what noticing is about. Noticing is about noticing that. Or I could say this.
So always being aware of here-ness.
You don't need to always be aware of it. Just recognize its true nature. Recognize its fundamentality.
So if content doesn't matter, is it just a matter of enjoying what shows up, or is even enjoying too much?
No. It doesn't matter. Doesn't mean you need to somehow downplay it or deny it or stop it. It doesn't matter means it doesn't matter what you do with it. You can enjoy it, you can go crazy with it, you can go berserk and get all absorbed and obsessive about things. It doesn't matter. That's what doesn't matter. Because the reaction to things is just more content.
Right.
And content doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter what you do or don't do. Because that doesn't actually, I mean, from the point of view of liberation, because that doesn't change the fundamental condition. It can't detract from it and it can't add to it.
So there really is nothing to do except do what shows up, and it doesn't matter. None of it.
There's nothing to do or everything to do, and who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. It really does not matter. And when you see that, that's what liberation is. You're liberated from mattering. You're liberated from importance. So you're free to do whatever the hell you do. I mean, not that you weren't always free, but you can recognize that the undeniable truth of that condition, that it actually is like that.
It is really amazing to just. I feel like I spent years feeling stuck and unable to do anything accomplishment-wise, and now I'm getting a lot done. And it's like, it doesn't matter, it's all the same thing. It's like, there's no difference.
Exactly, it doesn't matter, so you may as well do it.
Yeah.
Who cares, whatever, or not.
But I mean, like there's that whole point of time of feeling depressed by the fact that I couldn't get everything done. Was it just, not that it was a waste, because it was just what was showing up, but it had none of the meaning that I assigned to it.
Right.
And the accomplishment has none of the meaning that I had assigned to the hope of it. And
success and failure have no importance whatever. So you're free to be with them however you like.
There's also sort of a practical side to that. I mean, sort of getting rid of the attachment to any specific meaning, to any specific task. Yeah, you're basically free. You're liberated to do the task.
Exactly, to do it or not do it.
Yeah, right.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
So you want to be healthy and improve yourself, have at it. You want to screw off and be self-indulgent, have at it. You want to go out and save mankind or save the whales, have at it. You want to whatever.
yeah,
Have at it. Because there's no.
It's all the energy pattern that's showing up anyway.
It's like saying, well, what should happen in my dreams? It doesn't matter what happens in your dreams. It's just a damn dream. It does not matter. And this is exactly like that. And when you recognize that, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because it doesn't. Because it really doesn't.
It doesn't matter.
And this is one little coda to that. And it doesn't matter even if it matters.
Right.
If it matters to you and it's very important to you, that doesn't matter. So you're free to do that. You're free to be very serious about things and whatever, right? Because that doesn't matter. Sorry.
So it doesn't matter what arises, what happens. It doesn't matter what you do. But there's this ethics that people want to impose on happening.
People want to impose them.
Okay, me.
Okay. I don't know. Trump wants to build a wall.
It's already started.
People think things. People do things. So what? They're free to do it.
But so
Trump's free to build his wall.
So things don't,
or not.
it doesn't matter what happens, but it just matters to the mind? Is that?
Well, the mind creates the fantasy of mattering because the mind simulates, oh, this might be really happening. If it was really happening, it would have repercussions. And the repercussions matter because the mind identifies with partialities. It identifies with outcomes. It wants you to be on the winning side, or you to be on the side of pleasure, or you to be on the side of avoiding physical pain, and so on and so forth. And so the mind is doing all of this structuring, trying to navigate its way away from pain and towards pleasure, away from failure and towards success, and so on and so forth. And that's all fine, because that's what the mind does. And you're free to enact that or not in whatever way you do, and that's all fine too, because it doesn't matter.
But it seems like I get sort of stuck feeling like stuck not doing because I feel like, oh well, it has to matter what I'm doing, right? Like I have to love what I'm doing, and this has to be, I don't know, this has to be like purposeful at a deep level, but then.
So what is purposeful and what do you love?
I don't know, I get stuck in that.
Well, but for you, what do you think is purposeful? What would be purposeful? What's purpose? What's worth doing? What's worth achieving? What's worth striving for? Okay, cool. And here you are, home run. Success, win, A+. Yeah. You set the bar low, though, I want to say. On the other hand, hanging out with me is as good a thing to want to do as anything. Or or going to the movies, or reading a book, or surfing Facebook, or robbing a bank, having megalomaniac ideas of becoming the CEO of your own new tech company. I mean, whatever, right? It's like, have at it. It's wide open. Sky's the limit. But that doesn't mean you have to think big, because in actuality, there is no scale. So there is no big and there is no small. So small can be as big as it can possibly be. And huge can be tiny. But you'd be very wise to do what you like. You'd be very wise to enact your motivation. Because why not? And if you don't have any motivation, then you'd be wise to enact that.
The Buddhists, they talk about the refuges, right? And there's a refuge in the Dharma.
Yeah.
But refuge in ethics, right? So it's like, but that sort of
Dharma is not ethics.
Yeah.
No, okay. What is it?
Truth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actuality.
Ta-da.
This is the Dharma. That's what I'm talking about. Take refuge in the Dharma, which means get real in reality. And it's the easiest way to do that is notice you already are and always have been. So there's no refuge to take, because refuge is a done deal.
But there's a feeling of refuge, right? There's
Exactly, and the true feeling of the true refuge comes from recognition. Recognize that you have taken refuge in your being. You can't not take refuge in your being. Feel that. I mean, really feel it. It's really true. So to any degree your mind partializes yourself and identifies yourself as your body or your social role or your functioning or whatever that is within and completely embodied in the being of your experiential field. So that's refuge. And you don't need to take it because you already have it. And in that recognition, you feel it. It's a felt certainty. I mean, you get to drink it deeply and enjoy it and appreciate it.
Well, I feel like I feel like I have some sort of immediate understanding of that, and I have experience of that, like so like when I meditate, like if I do like some standing qigong or something like that, and like I'll taste this sort of calmness. Right?
Yeah, but it's not about calmness. I mean, again, calmness is fine. If you want to taste calmness, have at it. Go for calmness. But being is being even when you're agitated. Calmness is not an improvement on being, and agitation is not a detraction from being. They're just some of the many flavors that being can seem to present it.
So, don't you always feel sort of baseline calmness, just like you always feel baseline joy?
I feel a spectrum. There is a spectrum. So within the experiential field, there's vast aspect of it which is like space. It's basically an actual nothingness that if I give it any attention has a beauty and a liveliness and indefinability and an openness and a feeling that is delicious. And then within space, there's denser phenomena and denser phenomena and denser phenomena and denser phenomena is a more or less continuous spectrum, very much like physical space, where there's outer space and then you come down, you're within the magnetosphere, and then you come down a bit more, you get within the atmosphere, you come down a little lower, and you're within the biosphere, and so on and so forth. So, but the entire continuum is there. Outer space is right here. This is in outer space. So there's an omnipresence of the entire spectrum, the entire continuum. And if you look within your experience, it's that way too. This is not something subtle that you gain. It's simply recognizing that it's so and coming to appreciate it. Typically, I think people don't appreciate the subtler aspects of the spectrum because it seems like there's nothing going on there. And so there's no appreciation. It seems boring. It seems like, well, yeah, sure, there's this background space, but so what? Yeah. But that's a big mistake, because this background space is really the power that's doing all this, is what all this comes out of. So look within your experience and find the most subtle aspect of your experience you can find right here, right now, not in the abstract. Just like the space within which your experience is happening. And then go even subtler than that. Even just push out until you get to the most absolutely subtle aspect of it. But feel its actuality. This is really here. This is not a fantasy. And then look at the denser aspects and eventually you come down to sort of thought, and then eventually you come down to, feelings and stuff, and eventually you come down to the sensory experience and what have you. But the full range of the spectrum is always present. And in the attention, the sort of focus of attention may sort of drift or flit around within that, more or less randomly. And that's unimportant, because even when attention moves away from something, that something is still here. It's still present. And it's still felt by degrees. So in the same sense, you're looking at my face now, but things that are appearing in the periphery of your vision are still equally present as my face is, even if they aren't here. So likewise, if you're focusing on your thoughts, say you're focusing on emotional reaction to something or some fantasy or whatever, so you're pissed off about something, you read something on Facebook that just, whatever, makes you mad, but I don't know what. And so that's all going on. So that's where your focus is. But even when your focus is there, the space is here. You're not attending to it, but it's actually here. And all the other degrees of subtlety down to the degrees of density down to that are all here too. So just because you're focusing on something doesn't mean that the other things you're not focusing on have disappeared. And it's a matter of notice. This is part and parcel of what noticing is about. And the more you notice this, the more you recognize this, the more palpably you are aware that it's there even when you're not attending to it. And in fact, everyone is always aware that it's there, but people sort of hypnotize themselves to ignore it because it seems like nothing.
Or it's scary.
Well, yeah, scary, nothing, trippy, weird, undefined, whatever. It's outside the boundaries of what people define themselves as holding value in or being interested in. So it's just sort of noise in the system.
Well, it's outside definition.
Yeah,
So
yeah, of course.
if you're stuck on wanting and needing definition, then
Right.
it would be
But,
scary.
but part and parcel of noticing is discovering that there's actually no such thing as definition, even in the aspects that seem to be most defined. And someone's definition's out the window as an actual parameter, as an actual quality, then there's no point orienting to it or not. It's kind of arbitrary. Definitions of fantasy. Everything is even the most concrete aspects of experience are unresolvable, undefinable.
Also, like the definitions, I feel like I'm a guy. So, you know, it feels just really light. Just feels like, yeah, it feels quite distinct, but so what, you know? Just it's just, it has no meaning.
Yeah, it's not a matter of negating anything, but nothing is anything in any kind of locked-in way without needing to be negated or denied. It is what it is, but then you go try and say, well, what is that? You can't answer the question. But it is what it is. It doesn't go away, but there's no, you know, but the it that is there is, you know, you can't finish that statement.
So this aspect of fear that John was talking about, I've been thinking about that recently, and so it's almost like there's this sort of distraction that goes on, like there's this consumption of my attention by I don't know, like some imagining of something to be afraid of, right? Imagining of some abstract something to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And maybe that that draws away my attention from here-ness.
Well, it has the effect of drawing your attention from here-ness, but it also may have the effect of drawing your attention from what you're really afraid of.
And what I'm really afraid of is here-ness.
I don't know.
Probably. So you mentioned it.
What's to be afraid of here-ness?
Good question.
Nothing.
Good question.
Because I was talking about calmness earlier, and it seems like there's this sort of bandwidth of like a fear state that goes on, variations, and then it seems like in like meditation I sort of drop below that, or that sort of bandwidth dissolves a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I feel some sort of calmness.
But does it dissolve, or you're just ducking it? by kind of looking away from it.
Yeah, it's helpful.
The fruit of noticing and the power of noticing, good noticing, which is not the same as meditation in the sense of going to calmness, is that you discover you don't need to duck anything. You discover that everything's okay. Even what's not okay is okay. And that discovery is, of course, what gives liberation. You become free even of your own fearfulness by discovering that it's irrelevant, not by solving it or distracting yourself from it or transcending it or transforming it or anything. It just doesn't matter. So whether it persists or not it's absolutely nothing. And you come to know that very clearly and directly. It's not something you strive for and learn. It just is blatantly obvious, and so it's self-verifyingly that way. And so But the secret to noticing is always feel the fullness of what is here right now. Feel the full bandwidth, feel the spectrum. It's not like you need to hold it or, just see it. It's already here, and you're already seeing it. So just notice that you're seeing it. And it'll seem like nothing at first, or it'll seem like just some weirdness of spacing out at first. But don't worry about that, just do it. And then forget about it and go about your business, and then sometime later do it again. And every time you do that, it builds on previous times you've done it, and will shift your center of gravity from identifying to a partial self-image of yourself, which is where all problems are generated from by implication, into identifying with the actual fullness of your being, where there are no problems whatsoever.
That this vast space that you were talking about, at first it does seem sort of, maybe what I'm noticing is sort of the absence of meaning or definition.
Sure.
So at first it does seem empty.
Sure.
But if I can sort of rest in it and dwell in it enough, it gets very active.
Absolutely.
Really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't know what it's active with, but I mean,
You can't find it, but of course.
Yeah,
that's really true. And the problem is that typically when people are used to orienting towards, a heavy-handed narrative of what's going on or what they are, there's a coarseness of a threshold of coarseness of what is being acknowledged and appreciated, and things that are more subtle and more fine are just not being attended to, not being appreciated, because one is not sensitive enough. One is dulled down one's sensitivity, and so one only notices sort of gross, obvious stimuli and stuff. But so a large part of noticing is sensitivity training. I mean, not intending to develop sensitivity, but it intrinsically is a sensitivity training, because when you notice what's
almost
here,
sort of like fine tuning.
Yeah.
To get the perfect spot on the channel, on FM or something.
When you notice what's here is limitlessly subtle. It has no limit to how subtle it is. And so at first, typically, let's say, It's a start of noticing things might be, more or less similarly, of course, but then there's a sense that there's something more than that. It's a little weird and a little non-linear, and you can't get a handle on it. But as you continue with noticing, you get better and better at it. You become more and more sensitive to appreciate the nuance and the subtlety of the non-linearity and the indefinability of the experiential field. And as the sensitivity increases, then also awareness of the dynamism of subtle phenomena increases. So what seems to be virtually nothing in the beginning is revealed as being very eventful and very profound and pithy.
I was just thinking about, the whole advent of fear and, that actually you can't really know that you don't have fear until an occasion arises where you don't have fear. So I'm just thinking about the tipping point, because I don't have a lot of fear at this point in my life. I don't live in fear. I mean, I did a lot of my life live in fear.
Sure.
But I'm just sort of thinking about the tipping point where even though I don't know that there won't be fear, I don't live in fear that there will be fear.
Yeah, sure.
So that's sort of an interesting balance. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a profound sense, fear is fear of, fear is always a projection. And fear is how to put this in words. Fear is fear of fear, really.
Yeah.
It's like the boogeyman. It's like, well, what's the boogeyman? I don't know what the boogeyman is, but I'm afraid it's going to be terrible. So it's kind of a self-generated vortex that has no substance to it, and it makes its own substance by the fear that there's substance.
Yes.
It's a sort of a projection that has essentially no basis. But because of that, it can be profoundly powerful and localized anywhere or non-localized at all. The idea that there's something horrible that could happen, or there's some horrible thing that could appear, or there's some horribleness somewhere that might be horrible, and I'm really afraid of that. But you're projecting the horribleness that might be, and then you're reacting to that horribleness as being afraid of it. But you've already projected it as a fear, so of course you would be afraid of it, because that's the whole.
Yeah.
But the entire thing is, there's nothing there, but there's nothing anywhere, so that's not a surprise.
And I suppose that having gained some experience in being grounded in reality, actually, that's maybe the tipping point.
Well,
that I don't actually believe anymore that there is anything that is not this.
Yeah, exactly. When one is grounded, when one becomes more and more progressively grounded in reality, then that by the very fact of that, the relevance and the urgency of any beliefs just diminishes and becomes more ghostly. It may or may not cease or stop entirely, but it just becomes, more of a nothing, more evanescent, more of a,
Yeah. No, I mean, I still can anticipate fear.
Sure.
In a situation that is unknown or, but I know that from experience that if I just step forward, the ground appears,
Yeah.
but the hole doesn't appear.
Yeah.
So that's an, it's sort of like, I mean, I suppose you could call it an act of faith, but in fact it isn't an act of faith.
No.
It's just a step in the pathway of reality, or it's hard to say what it is actually.
I would say if you become very aware that whatever machinations happen, they are this. So, like for example, you might have a fantasy of something horrible happen, and then you might get all worked up about that. And so even as all of that's going on, all of that is just an energy expression of this. I mean, it is that immediately, and the more clearly you are aware of this context, the more obvious that is, even as it's occurring. It's not a matter of having that not occur.
Yeah.
So you can have fantasies, and you can get all emotionally reactive to them, but that whole loop is just a little tiny vortex, a little smoke ring in this vastness, and it's neither here nor there. It doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Yeah.
And it may come up, and it may have some persistence, and then it dissipates, and then something else comes up, and it's always like that. But nothing. It never.
Nothing solid ever appears.
Yeah, it never leaves this. It never becomes. It's always just this here.
Yeah.
And so all of this seeming eventfulness can occur, but then it doesn't need to not occur. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So even fearfulness and projection and reactivity don't matter.
Right.
And even as they occur, they don't matter. So, I mean, and again, this becomes more palpable and more just intrinsically obvious as one develops a sense of what this is, as one's center of gravity of identification spontaneously shifts into the full field rather than in partialized self-image and so on.
Yeah, it's almost like a completely different path. I mean, it's not at all connected to the other path, in the sense that it confirms itself. Reality confirms itself.
Yes, reality confirms itself, and it's self-verifying, and it has authority.
And it doesn't
Of actuality.
It doesn't confirm itself by invalidating non-reality.
Right.
It actually just confirms itself by being real.
Yeah.
And then that is sort of self-reinforcing in a way.
It is. It's very much so. Yoga realization empowers, and it empowers itself.
Yeah.
And so, as your realization becomes more and more empowered, then your unrealization by correspondence just becomes less and less relevant.
Slinks away.
Well, it's just who cares?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a neurotic person with a crazy mind that's projecting all sorts of fantasies and reactivity. But so what?
Yeah.
Because all of that's this little event in this self-verifying, obvious certainty that is here, that is untouched by any of that.
Yeah.
The experience of yoga is peculiar because one leaves oneself behind. One leaves one's human self behind, but the human self that's been left behind doesn't go anywhere.
Yes.
So it's right here. It's just not really. It's not you anymore. It's not this all-consuming and all-absorbing urgency that demands all sorts of attention and defense and strategizing and reactivity and all of that. So the personality and all of its mechanisms are where they always were, but they're known to be not you in any powerful sense. So all that urgency and everything just seemed to be a fantasy. It seemed to be irrelevant. But all that mechanism doesn't necessarily cease.
I mean, it seems in a way like it's just a gentle clarification in a way.
It is. It's exactly a clarification. You see what's always been going on. You see what it always was, and you even kind of realize you have always actually kind of known that, but somehow it was you couldn't hope that it was really like that.
Yeah.
But then you see, oh wow, it really is, and
Yeah.
then wow, that's nice.
I mean, I sometimes have concern about, my endless striving to look at every corner and to not leave any stone unturned. But I don't even have to worry about that actually, because it's just doing itself anyway, its own good time.
And again, it becomes more and more obvious that it doesn't really matter what you do.
Yeah.
So even as you're doing it, even as it is mattering to you, even as it's mattering to you, that doesn't matter.
Right.
It just seems like there's this desire to have something matter.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, it's like this meaningless desire and this desire to look forward to things, and that
Sure.
like and looking forward to something is the world's greatest gift. You never know how it's gonna actually be.
Sure.
And it's just still gonna be being no matter what you,
And you're free to do that. You're free to approach things that way. You're free to have things matter.
but it's kind of a myth that they do, so.
Well, sure, but mattering never mattered. But there's always been mattering. We've always experienced mattering. So mattering can obviously exist as an experiential actuality, even though there is no actual mattering. So it's all good. So you get to have mattering and enjoy it.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Even if, and you don't need to let yourself be tormented by the fact that it doesn't matter. You know, actuality is endlessly paradoxical. So it's you can never get yourself in a conundrum with it. It's endlessly forgiving. So nothing matters, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean you can't have all the mattering you want.
But
Because there's no internal contradiction in actuality. Actuality is infinitely exclusive.
But there is this, I don't know, point of no return is the right word, but there's this point where you just know it doesn't matter.
Yeah, sure, there is.
And but there's this little bit of this trace of wanting things to matter. But there's like this sense of like, well, how can one be any happier than one is in any moment?
Sure. But all that sorts itself out in practice, because you know, if you invest in non-mattering, and sooner or later, if any kind of mattering arises, then great. There's that. And if it doesn't, then there's that.
Right.
Well, and it's not a personal mattering anyway.
No.
You know, reality may want to sort of explore mattering some way or another.
Yeah, there's no personal anything. Personal is a myth.
Yes. So that's maybe the loop that is still, you know, wound in, that, you know, needs to be freed up, or whatever it will be, if it is, or.
In the seeing and noticing, everything is intrinsically freed without needing to become freed.
Yeah.
So you can become free of everything without needing to become free of anything. So you can still be caught up in everything. But in the noticing, you are freed from it, even in the enactment of its seeming being caught up. You become free of your neurotic personality without needing to stop your neurotic personality from being what it has always been.
Well, I suppose that is an aspect of fear that I still have, is that, you know, there is more neuroses to be discovered. That, you know, the fullness of my neurotic personality is not quite appeared yet. So that's reassuring.
It just seems fantastic and awful at the same time.
Well, it is. It is fantastic and awful. It's all extremes at once. You know, because all extremes are, of course, it.
I think it just comes down to I'm not doing anything, and I don't matter, and the fact that I don't matter is a little. It's not upsetting per se, because it's kind of enjoyable simultaneously with the traces of and the historical. You know, there was a time when I thought I mattered.
Of course.
What kind of a man?
Yeah. That's right. You've been told you don't matter all your life. How funny. How tragic, pathetic, and funny. And how true. But also, one becomes acclimatized to this as one lives with it over time, so that in the fresh revelation of this astounding condition, or the relatively fresh revelation of this astounding condition, and how it doesn't matter, and how it's entirely complete, regardless of what happens, and so on and so forth. There's a certain kind of a contrast with the way it's always felt to be.
Right.
That can be a kind of a disjunction or a tension or a paradox, you know, an active paradox. But again, as one sort of lives with it or matures in familiarity with it, all of that sort of reshuffles itself a little bit, so that the seeming contradictions and paradoxes and tensions are seen or discovered to not actually be that, even though they seem to be that. You know, it's sort of, you know, in a profound sense, one enters a new world in yoga, and of course, at first crossing the threshold into this new world, it's like there's a shocking difference in between this and one's remembered history. But again, as one becomes accustomed to the nature of this new world, the perspective, the relative perspective sort of settles itself down or hits a maturity of perspective experientially. And it's sort of, I won't say it ever makes sense, because God knows that never happens.
You're not trying.
As one matures in yoga, one develops a very deep comfort with paradox.
Yeah.
And a very deep comfort with seeming contradiction as not actually being contradictory. You know, which is of course irrational, but actual. And so as one becomes more familiar with this, that becomes clearer and clearer in its own way.
Well, it goes hand in hand with the discovery of how that this is unresolvable.
Yeah, well, yeah, one and the same. It's all one and the same. But the flavor of what that feels like has a different, you know, can seem to have a different texture or impact or import as one matures and living within it for historically for a while and becoming more familiar with it.
Definitely. It's sort of like all the contradictions. They're just kind of, you know, they're unresolvable and fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun and interest and interest in. The mind has actually a lot of fodder to play with things and be bemused by things because of the amazing contradictory nature and the fact that things don't resolve and the fact that things don't ever come together, and yet here we are, you know.
Yeah, I always wanted resolution, but.
Good fucking luck. Not in this reality. You came to the wrong place.
Signed up for the wrong place.
Yeah.
It's true. It's like just the sense of being done is always, you know, something that I crave, but there is none.
Why don't we take a 10-minute break? So we'll be back in 10 minutes.
I'm just going to do a little PR, that, you know, this is one of my question mark woodblock prints.
That's
here,
right.
and that I'm here for a limited engagement, and that I have them available, many different
Yeah, several more in the store.
So if anyone's interested in, you know, acquiring one of these wonderful creations, you're more than welcome to. I can send you some images or whatever.
Did you remember the plates?
Yeah, I think I have the plates. Let me see, I think they're here. I didn't remember. I didn't. Maybe they're here. They're in the car. I think they're in the car. Yeah. Did you ever see my weaving? Yeah,
Is your room just this way?
yeah, that is the one. I have to get a bigger one now.
Hey, Mom, how you doing? Did you call me? Hi, it's me, Stephen. Did you come?
Friends have. So,
I told you I'm gonna be home about your bedtime, about 10 o'clock, okay?
what did you use for ingredients?
Yeah, like 10 o'clock,
This
okay?
red for the wall.
No, I have no combo.
Did you eat your dinner?
That one is orange, and two crabs, and that's recycled.
Of course, I'll have to do a photo shoot on you.
Yeah, you know, like paper.
I think you could do better.
I mean, I can't even put,
Yes.
the scarves
and
scraps in
Well,
my.
traditionally they were odis, you know, Japanese odis for wearing.
Oh.
That's what they were originally made for, you know, where you tie them around and around.
Yeah, I could, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, I have done that in the past.
Holy is a very common.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's lovely.
It's interesting to see how they begin, how they invent fabrics, you know.
Is this, you're not doing this, are you? You've got a proper, no. It's still a lot of work. The setup is,
The setup's the main thing. Doing the weaving's actually not bad, it's the threading, warping
my sister did a whole thing at college on weaving, and she wove bark.
Oh, yeah.
She had regular
Yeah.
setup, but she
Yeah.
would just weave in
Yeah,
bark.
you can weave anything. Yeah.
And it was, some of it was just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's what you do when you know, you no longer have to worry about wondering whether you're getting it or not, you just do things. And the energy of that is in the creation, which is nice.
So is your loom in Australia?
Yeah, yeah, I've actually just been online looking for a bigger loom that I'll maybe buy here. And I'm just looking, is it worth it for me to do that, or whether I should just get a bigger one here. I'm gonna ship some.
Yes. Good job.
No, it's real, it's like coconut.
Aren't they going to be cheaper there?
No, with the dollar conversion, they end up being about the same.
Yeah, I know, I have the same thing, but I have a couple people I talked to about it, and we're all like so freaking obsessive about it, it's weird.
Well, yeah, but look at
And Jehovah's Witness about it too. Yeah.
Alright, Willie's it is.
Being putting on a suit and going door to door.
You might like it.
What, they're kidding?
You're putting on a suit and going door to door on Sundays and
Oh,
not
yeah?
having to go.
Oh, pamphlets.
Have you discovered ketogenesis?
Not on Sundays.
They're not even ketogenics, but I'm gonna call it ketogenesis, because that's more of a religious sound. Have you been saved from carbs?
Evil of carbs.
Have you accepted that as your personal statement?
What does that diet do to your blood pressure, if anything?
Mine's low, it's lower.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also this way, so that's
No.
usually lowers your blood pressure. I just got off my CPAP last night for the first time in 20 years.
Cool.
Really?
Wow.
That was really scary. It was actually a little scary.
Wow, that's really big.
Did you sleep all right?
I think I slept okay, yeah. I didn't wake up feeling like I worked out, which is what usually happens. When I hold my breath 100 times an hour, so.
Wow.
So it didn't feel like sleep at all. It felt more like an Olympic elliptical machine.
People say their triglycerides go down and
Yeah, no,
cholesterol. and all
I
that.
mean, I think that's the clue, I just have to.
Well, sugar, carbs are, they're gonna throw you off, huh?
Say what? Sort of separate
And
things.
it cuts the inflammation in your body too.
I don't do,
Oh,
oh, I mean, yeah. that was really-
maybe I should do ketogenic diet.
I don't know if it's so good for people who are underweight.
They have a version for people who want to gain weight. I was-
Oh, they do?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. Check it
I
out.
haven't seen that one.
Yeah.
I
On the sofa.
Well, just use it.
I mean, bodybuilders,
Just
there are a
Google
lot
it,
of,
you know?
there are- yeah.
Google ketogenics gain weight or something like
Yeah,
that.
keto.
Never heard
That'll
that.
be something.
Oh, I had to make up my own.
Massive amount of information.
Find it, Irma?
Yeah, it's behind John.
What are you looking for?
But it's definitely good for anybody, I mean,
There's a
created to,
Facebook site, I think it's called
Fight
Keto Fit or one of
so,
those, and that's,
it
they've
actually
got
for
some
that.
interesting information about that sort of thing. All sorts of things.
Okay, say that again, Facebook,
Keto Fit, I think it's called.
Keto Fit.
Oh, Keto Fit? I haven't heard that one. People do get wildly religious about, and all kinds of they do the same thing with this as they do with everything else.
Yeah.
People
Well,
love
I
a
like the-
bandwagon.
What?
People love a bandwagon.
They do, and then they love being religious and strict and like.
Well, that's the whole point of a bandwagon.
Yeah,
Politics is like that, patriotism is like
Yeah.
that, religion is like that.
Yeah, that,
I think they also like routine
Yeah.
and discipline.
and telling everybody else they're wrong.
That's always a plus.
Yeah. You're eating berries? You use Truvia?
You can't eat fruit?
Well, you eat berries, it's different people have different carb limits and stuff, so, but berries is pretty much. But at the beginning, somebody said, oh yeah, people they stall in their weight loss because their body, I don't know, something
I'll get some
craves the
water.
glucose or I don't know what.
I like that there's lazy keto. That's my idea.
Yeah, well, that's my version.
You gotta be lazy.
Now I discovered the frozen cauliflower rice that's already cooked.
Frozen cauliflower?
Yeah, Trader Joe's has frozen and it's organic. The fresh is organic.
Cool.
So I just defrost that
Where is it, in the freezer section?
in the freezer section. I defrost that now and,
So it's cauliflower that's been riced.
yeah.
Cool.
I defrost that and
Yeah.
stick some kind of sauce and cheese over it or some kind of sauce over it and that's in a microwave and that's how I,
Do they have cauliflower spaghetti?
no, but they have the broccoli slaw. The broccoli slaw is like spaghetti
Oh,
to me.
okay.
And then they're noodleizers at Bed Bath and Beyond. And I make noodles out of that.
Oh.
That's more.
Determined. Because I
I
matter.
don't do that like once
Just as he said, experimenting with not mattering.
Noodleizer, I like that.
What, do you make noodles on them?
zucchini and daikon and summer squash and it's a little machine for $20. There's a nicer one on sale when Amazon had their Prime Day, but I restrained myself. I sort of wish I'd gotten it now because it looked like it was a lot less working.
You can do it with fruit as well.
Yeah. There's actually, there's a site called Inspiralizer, like Inspiralizer, yeah, and this one thing is actually a New York Times bestseller, the recipes using Spiralizers. You can do a channel.
Does your computer not have a?
This one's higher quality.
Oh.
So it was pretty cheap, it actually has a Zeiss lens in it.
Yeah, looks very cool.
There's stereo mics built in too.
Oh, nice. Are those lights on the side or just?
It's just like they're just pilot lights, it says it's on.
So you've got a new one?
No, I've had this for a few years.
Oh.
Like the little sound it makes whenever you focus.
Yeah.
Can you text me what that is one day?
Sure. Well, are we reconstituting?
It's possible.
Start the second half of the talk.
Are we starting again?
We've started.
But you're talking about how when you get situated in thisness, that there's a sort of the mind is free for play or something like that. Right? There's a sort of,
No more than it ever was, but it becomes more. It can feel more uninhibited because it becomes clearer and clearer that nothing hangs in the balance, so the mind is free to go wherever it wants. When one is ignorantly identified with a partial self-image of personality and history and body and so on, then there are implicit urgencies and fears and strategizing that the mind tends to get caught up in, and as one develops a more concrete realization of what the actual condition is of what is actually here, then it becomes clearer and clearer that one is not limited to being what one had formerly defined oneself as, and also that all of this activity of mind and so on is of not much importance at all one way or the other. Then all of that, implicitly the urgency of all of that just dissipates. So in the palpable sense of less urgency, there's a kind of a relaxation, and the mind can relax and become more playful. And it may let's say continue to be obsessive if it has an obsessive nature and so on and so forth. But there's a feeling of entertainment or enjoyment or just I can say just fun about it, more so than urgency of need or self-preservation or self-defense or something like that.
Yeah.
But do it and find out. And you tell me what it's like.
but it just seems very confusing at this moment.
Well, it is confusing, but it never stops being confusing. It never makes sense. You just let go of it needing to not be confusing. Relax into confusion. The very nature of actuality, the way actuality is organized within itself, from a human point of view, is pure confusion, pure irrationality. It makes no sense whatever. And so as one comes to see that, then again, this urgency of wanting to make sense or needing to make sense just is seen to be absurd, and that it dissipates. The mind may still play games of trying to make sense, but there's no, again, the urgency falls off.
So you don't kind of believe it anymore.
Well, that's what I mean. Belief is what generates the urgency, is a sense of, this matter, something hinges on it. If I don't do this, then this, that, and the other, all of which is held together by belief, by holding it to be objectively true. And when you see that only one thing is objectively true and has nothing whatsoever to do with anything you can think, then what you think or not, and anything even you believe about what you think just is obviously seen as an absurdity.
So much of discourse, the vast majority of discourse, it has implicit within it some idea of a body, some idea of a timeline, some idea of a self, right? And so that that comes to seem to matter a lot less.
Yes.
Right?
It seemed to be absurd. In the very structure of language, it seemed to be an absurdity.
Hey, Gavin, when you said timeline, do you mean like memory? As,
People talking about things in terms of time and what's happening and what happens before, what happens next, and what
Right.
leads to what and
I
what
see.
causes what.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, the
that's,
whole human milieu.
yeah, that's a lot more sort of abstract than memory is a little.
Memory is concrete, but
Yeah.
but supposing the memory refers to an actual timeline is
Well, there,
abstract.
yeah.
Yeah, right. I remember those days.
Yeah, yeah, okay, I get it, I got it. I understand.
But this is part of the challenge in spirituality is Western world and probably virtually anywhere. The wannabe yogi is immersed in a human milieu and the very structure of language and the structure of the logic and so on and so forth is all entirely unreal. And yet there's a continual ongoing reinforcement of the implication of this unreality in the course of social dealings with other people and the very language that they use and so on and so forth. But again, as one engages in actual yoga, one sees more and more clearly for oneself this unreality, the fact that human ideas are not accurate in the least in referring to what it actually is and the way that it actually is now. And as it's seen more and more clearly, one becomes less and less entangled in it. One sees it like the playing of children in a kindergarten playground or something, where they're babbling all sorts of inanities, and you don't worry about it. You don't really care what they say because they're just a bunch of children.
In a sandbox.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So that question of what matters seems related to a question of like what is there to talk about,
Sure.
And for you who understand so immediately and fully the sort of the abstractness of the cultural discourse.
Right.
So the things that you are drawn to talk about, well, like you're drawn to talk about spirituality, right? And you're drawn to talk about a sort of like to talk in such a way as to dissolve confusion or dissolve delusion, right?
Well, I try and make clear as best I can what is actually occurring here, and especially to help people discover this for themselves. It's really the only thing I'm interested in talking about. I don't talk much in my normal life. I'm a pretty quiet guy. Partially by temperament, but largely because humans spend their time talking about with each other are completely absurd. It's fun in the spirit of play, in the spirit of just amusement, but You know, as soon as any degree of of implicit importance about what's being said enters the picture, it becomes sort of, you know, off-putting to me. Being with the textual presence of actuality as it is occurring is extremely rich and luscious, and I could use the word nourishing or entertaining, but it's non-verbal by its very nature because it cannot be verbalized in human language. And so most of what I do is enjoy the texture of actuality in real time. And even when I'm talking in these meetings, I'm basically doing that. That's how I know what to say.
How does that work?
Not very well. Not very well, but you do what you can.
But you're also drawn to talk about art to a certain extent. Like you like to talk about music, and you like to talk about like science fiction.
I'm sure I have a few things I'm interested in that I'll talk about. Sure.
Is that part of?
But none of it has any importance. It's something to do. It's something that I do.
That sort of brings me back to my earlier question about art, right? So like there's something playful about art, right? Sort of self-consciously playful.
Maybe. I think art is deadly serious myself. I think art is one of the most serious human activities, human expressions, because the best art is explicitly, what's the word? The best art is explicitly transcendental, explicitly challenging.
Personal.
What's that?
Personal.
Well, certainly personal.
Can you
The best art, the observer somewhere unexpected, beyond the bounds of anywhere they could have anticipated going. Which is subversive in a way. It's subversive of normalcy. It's subversive of structure and logic. The best art is an irrational assault. I mean, when you see a piece of art that moves you, I mean, I would say see if I'm talking about visual art, but any kind of art, true art. I mean, art is defined by this movement rather than, there's a lot of art that isn't even intended to be art. But you know, you experience something and you go, whoa. And right there, that is the artistic engagement. You know, every time I see a Van Gogh, you know, the few times I've seen a Van Gogh in person, I just look at it and my jaw drops. I mean, it's like, what the fuck? I mean, it's just some paint. It's just some paint on a canvas or something. But like, you know, I feel like I'm being punched or something. You know, it's palpably weird, and that is the hallmark of art. So you could call it playful if you want, but I would say there's a power and a seriousness in it that I wouldn't describe as being particularly playful.
I mean, he spent most of his life in an institution too, a lot of his life.
Sure, well, he was obviously dealing with intensities,
Yeah.
and these intensities are communicated in his art.
Yeah.
and they're palpable. I mean, you feel it. You look at it, it's like it's completely obvious. Like, whoa, something going on here.
Yeah. It's really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I think any kind of talent is that, in spite of what is thought to be happening. You know, anyone that can manifest a talent, you know, a real, just an ability to do something exceptional, it is transcendental explicitly because talent itself is transcendental, and so as it manifests, it displays that. I mean, where does talent come from? You know, where does someone that can do something amazing, you know, where's it come from? What is it? You can't possibly say. It's, you know, it's a manifestation of the irrational inherent intelligence. And so the workings of that talent are a display of that by degrees, depending on how much it's been watered down by and stuff.
By who?
Being counters and such.
I'll be counted.
Businessmen.
So what you do in these talks is a deadly serious irrational assault.
Yes.
It doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter.
At a certain point, it feels like there's a dichotomy between interpretation and direct experience. And then it seems like there's a dichotomy between noticing that there's no dichotomy and not noticing that there's no dichotomy. So,
Yeah.
There
There can be endless regresses of seemings of dichotomies and dichotomies of non-dichotomies.
yeah.
And all of that is just the intrinsic paradoxical nature of this.
And that just kind of hits a saturation point at which it becomes obvious that there's.
Well, it's not even a saturation point. It just becomes clearer and clearer that it's an infinite regress. In other words, you can ride that out as far as you want to go, and it still goes farther, and you never hit bottom. It's like a turtles all the way down kind of thing. And when you see that that's what it is that, then you see it's not about dichotomy or not. It's just like that is just like a readout of what it is, which is weird, which is, you know, just unfathomably weird. You know, I mean, you know, let's say, to me, very palpably and very obviously, the most extreme dichotomy is the dichotomy between inclusive wholeness and infinite differentiation. As I look at my experiential field, it is one thing. It includes itself. It's not at all separated from itself or divided from itself. And yet, it presents as a literally infinite degree of differentiation. So it appears to be infinitely differentiated from itself, or more accurately within itself, but it is an infinite inclusive continuity. You know, I mean, talk about a fucking dichotomy. It's like, try and make sense of that. And it's really obvious. I mean, just look at your experience. It's like, yeah, it's one thing. It's this here-ness, and yet, Jesus Christ. I mean, does there seem to be a lot going on, or what?
It's a bit like looking at an ant's nest. You see this collection of ants, and yet there's ants.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to sort of analogize it, but it's really obviously that, and yet it's not. You can't come down on one side or the other because there's no sides. It is both sides. I mean, it's like physicists looking at, you know, An electron is a particle and it is a wave. It's like, oh, okay. You know, what do you do with that? How do you make? Well, you can't make sense of that. It just happens how it happens to be, and that's a very specific display of the same phenomena.
The other day, I posted my favorite little Moiba strip on one of these groups. And I said, okay, does this have one side or two? And one guy writes back, yes.
What is the sound of one hand clapping? Maybe it's true.
It's a strange one. Or just directionality.
Everything and anything, you end up in the same, you know, unresolvability. The same catastrophic unresolvability. You know, the way, in terms of the way I put it, or the way I tend to express it, you know, I don't know that I'd say I see it that way, but I guess I kind of do since I express it that way. A large part of yoga is coming to recognize what I call the inherent intelligence, which is the irrational intelligence that is the primal intelligence. You know, what we think of as intelligence, our personal intelligence and the logical intelligence and the conceptual intelligence is a very, very small offshoot of that. But through yoga, through noticing, one is confronted with the inherent intelligence, which because of its irrational and infinite nature is capable of dealing with paradox as non-problematic, but dealing with it intelligently, and assimilatively, not just dealing with it in terms of ducking it or bypassing it or something like that. And of course, the inherent intelligence cannot be verbalized because it is irrational and beyond process and structure. But it is immediate and obvious and very palpable. So it's, you know, it's a very I would say it's easy and clear to discover it, and in the course of yoga, when it comes upon this early on, and you know, settles into it more and more deeply. And it is this sort of the moving from orienting to the rational and personalized intelligence into the the impersonal inherent intelligence, the irrational inherent intelligence, which you know, is one way of characterizing the profound reorientation that yoga affects. You know, one discovers the way things are in a way that is clear and intelligent and meaningful, but not in a way that can possibly be verbalized or structuralized or abstracted, because it's not like that. And yet the inherent intelligence is quite capable of assimilating all of that nature, because it is of that nature, and it is one with what is doing that nature. And of course, it's already, you know, it's already, you know, in a way we're very familiar with it, because it's doing us, it's doing our biology, it's making your heart beat, it's regulating your cellular function. I mean, the whole thing. It's all being done, and it's irrational and beyond process. But again, it's something that the rational, as long as one is, you know, addicted to orienting to a rational mind and a logical mind and an abstracted mind, like normal human functioning, impossible to acknowledge or engage with this irrational inherent intelligence, because they don't have much in common from the point of view of the personalized mind.
Is it a reorientation so much? It feels like kind of like this a relaxation of orientation.
Yeah, well, there's one and the same.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a reorientation into non-orientation. You can say. I mean, again, you can't. It's pointless and absurd to try to pin down whether it's this or that, because it isn't. Because it's always none of the above.
It may be pointless and absurd, but we keep on doing it.
Sure. I mean, well, it's interesting, because again, all of this dancing around it sort of indicates it in a way.
Yes.
Sort of like tangents indicate a circle, even though they don't ever actually become the circle at any more than a point.
And I get the feeling that if we don't talk about it, we won't realize it.
Well, it helps. I think talking serves to direct attention at it, which becomes a kind of an affected noticing. If it's being artfully talked about, then one is drawn towards. Wait a minute, what are we talking about? And that very question that becomes the koan. What are we talking about? Becomes the koan that empowers noticing. We're talking about something that makes no sense, but we're talking about it. So what are we talking about?
Well, it's sort of like you talk about it, and it makes sense or not or whatever. But then you sort of live along, and it sort of makes sense in the living.
Yeah. Yeah, you recognize what was being talked about.
Right.
And that's sort of why catastrophization is of no use whatsoever.
So what is?
This whole catastrophization, to do with what's going to happen and how and when, and then something that we don't understand or know about will suddenly swoop down and change our lives forever. When, reality's doing everything anyway. So it's like, it won't be what we think it is. And it'll happen in its own good time or. Right?
Very quickly. It's accelerating.
And it will be what we think it
Big rip.
we think it's gonna be.
We'll just be sitting here talking about reality. Having chai and apple crumble that John makes for dessert.
As the Korean nukes fall.
What's the time frame for that? You had it first.
The end of August.
After
That's what the Koreans said.
Oh yeah, they're gonna bomb it.
Oh, maybe I won't go to Paris.
Oh well.
Paris is about
Yeah, it's far away.
Paris is probably farther away. I don't know if it is or not. Yeah, the globe.
As far as the kind of trudging back and forth between the two orientations, it can seem to occur. Would it be a stretch to relate that to the gunas?
Not necessarily. I mean, a little bit. Not necessarily. I mean, I think a lot of the way, what the gunas are is not one thing. I think different schools of philosophy use the gunas to sort of present the whole different spinning. So I think there's probably about maybe 4 or 5 different systems of the gunas that seem like the 3 gunas that are use the same nomenclature. So it's kind of catch as catch can of what's actually being referred to. But within some of those systems, I would say the answer would probably be yes.
Thinking primarily just about sense of needing to overcome inertia.
Well, the tension between rajas and tamas are the tensions implicit within dual mind, within conceptual thinking, where there's this and the that are unreconcilable. Whereas the sattvas is by its very nature is lucid light and within that, the flavor of that guna, the inherent intelligence can be recognized, and all of a sudden paradox just becomes paradox without being an antagonism or mutual exclusion. So in one sense, you can see it that way, but that's not necessarily the only sense that the gunas are presented in. This whole doesn't, like I said, there's probably about 3 or 4 different, completely different philosophies that all present as the gunas, and then it's not really spelled out that they're talking about something different because they're using the same words. But anyway, I mean, that's neither here nor there, because of course the important thing is the experience itself rather than the context of different ways it's being put in different traditions. A way to put the biggest difference between the perspective of individual mind versus the perspective of the inherent intelligence is individual mind has an inside and an outside, and the inherent intelligence has no outside. Everything is inside. So what's inside for the individual mind is inside for the inherent intelligence, and what's outside for the individual mind is inside for the intelligence. So you have self and other, which is inside and outside for the individual mind, but in inherent intelligence, they're both inside. They're both self. For example.
Is there a way to get more of that?
well, it's noticing. I mean, it becomes obvious. It's immediate and obvious that that's the case. This is why the inherent intelligence is, from the point of view of the individualized mind, the inherent intelligence is antagonistic because it makes no sense and it seems destructive and impossible. Whereas from the point of view of the inherent intelligence, the individual mind is not a problem. So the inherent intelligence is quite comfortable with the individual mind, but the individual mind is horrified about the inherent intelligence because it seems the ultimate threat. It's like finiteness and infiniteness. Infinity has no problem with finiteness, but finiteness can't handle infinity at all.
It seems like the individual mind also has a problem with the individual mind.
Well, yeah, it does. It does. Well, of course it does, because the nature of the individual mind is to create problems. And so it sees itself as a problem, it sees otherness as a problem, it sees problems everywhere. And the inherent intelligence, contrarily, has no problems whatsoever. And it's quite comfortable with everything that seems like a problem, and it's none of them are problems. And again, this is just felt palpably self-verifyingly so in yoga, in noticing what is here, feeling your way into what is actually here. This becomes very obvious.
So is there a way to talk about this stuff with muggles?
Not that it'll be assimilatable. It is talked about. I mean, basically, in one sense, all speech is talking about it. In a more explicit sense, there's all sorts of myths and stories that talk about it.
What myths and stories?
Harry Potter, superheroes, all kinds of things.
What about like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland?
Sure, that's a good example. That's a little less popular these days in pop culture, but yeah.
So that accentuates the sort of playful aspect, as opposed to like what's his name?
Well,
Painter.
a lot of the aspects, Dodgson was a mathematician, and a lot of the aspects presented in those stories, especially through the looking glass, point out the difference between the finite and the infinite, and rationality and irrationality.
And they're relative.
Yeah. But in modern culture, you have a lot of different things, sort of themes, mythic themes that come up in movies, like I was talking about Harry Potter and superheroes. You have the myth of the rock star, who is someone who's basically irrational and can do whatever they want, and yet they're looked up to by everyone who in themselves can't. So it's a sort of a crazy wisdom figure of someone who transcends morality, but is laudable for that reason, contrary to the very morality that the people who are worshiping it supposedly espouse, and so on and so forth. Or movie stars, I mean, it's the same phenomenon. Everyone loves to see how movie stars are screwing up and screwing each other and doing all these horrible things, and they're being worshipped for that. Their transcendence of morality and structure, their transcendence of rationality and logic. But the problem with, so-called muggles is that level of mentality sees the things as being the things that they're being seen as. Is the things as the principles that are being embodied. So to a muggle, a movie star is just a movie star. Harry Potter is just Harry Potter.
Or a work of art is an embodiment of certain rational principles, rather than
Perhaps, sure.
an assault on rationalism. I was thinking of that movie Arrival. We talked about that as being an assault on sort of.
Yeah, that's very similar. That's a very similar thing. It was an infinite nonlinear continuum versus rationality versus a linear rational interpretation, and the dominance of the irrational continuum. Because once she got it and immersed herself in that transcendence, she was able to draw on it and basically reshape the world. So I mean, that's a perfect myth of the whole thing. It's a perfect myth of yoga. But people have always oriented towards myths as powerful representations of truth. But the majority of people have thought the myths are just about what they seem to be about, whereas people who are more wise and who are intrinsically seeing things deeper penetrate the myth to what it's really about. Inherent intelligence uses words and symbols as doorways into actuality. So the words and symbols have no importance in themselves. Whereas the personal intelligence thinks words and symbols are things in themselves. It stops at the word. So in a powerful spiritual conversation, there's words being used, but the words are not what's being talked about. Something other is being talked about. And if it's artfully done, the words indicate that otherness, and people who are sufficiently sensitized can see through the words to what's actually being referred to. The words, it just sounds like a bunch of gibberish. And the ability to do that depends solely upon the ability of the listener to function on the level of the inherent intelligence to some degree.
I have a contrary experience to that. When I think, well, when I assume I'm working on the level of inherent intelligence, nothing makes sense.
Right, well, nothing does make sense.
But when I'm in my everyday mind, I make sense of all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
But actually, nothing makes sense. And I've never, I always get to that place where, and it's fine. You don't need to make sense, but there is no sense to be made.
Right. But inherent intelligence knows that and is not bothered by it.
Not bothered at all.
You know.
It's a bit like playing Monopoly or something. Playing a game.
You mean using words?
Well, the way you can get the rules of the game, you can actually win or lose the game.
Oh, yeah.
You know that it is no consequence.
Yeah,
one way
sure,
or the other.
Sure.
Well, all sense requires some sort of parameter, some sort of shape or box or, structure. And that's all it is. And so in a way, things make sense as long as you can play with some structure, some way of shaping it.
And the inherent intelligence is in a boxless box. It's in a space that has a spaceless space with no boundaries and not even any space. And so its way of making sense is in terms of that, which doesn't look a lot like sense from the kind of sense logic that requires definition.
This image, the boxless box.
Well, it is. I mean, if you look at the field of your experience, you can't find edges. You can't find any parameters. It's obvious. It's undeniable. It's undeniably actual and manifest and completely obvious. And yet, anywhere you go looking, trying to find out anything about it, or its edges, or its boundaries, or its shape, or its anything, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing to be found.
feel like I don't have a very good understanding of the way that the energy runs in the body. And it feels like in a certain way, it's more productive to the yoga if the energy is running a certain way, and it's less productive if it's not.
Yes, yes, but there's no formula because there's no one way that the energy runs.
Mhm.
The energy simultaneously runs who knows how many ways, even contradictorily, and constantly changing and with different degrees of balance between the different kinds of runnings. And it's certainly true that the yoga works better when it's aligned certain ways, but all of that is again, it's not linear enough to contrive or to simply create. But again, it's kind of like waves coming in. You sort of get an intuition of how to surf it. When surf's up, you get sort of a feeling for it, and then you take advantage of it if it's convenient or what have you.
My strategy at certain times has just been to kind of like follow the Shakti.
Yeah, that's a really good way to do it.
Okay.
And you kind of develop an intuition of what that means, because the Shakti again is infinitely complex and subtle, and it's not just one way, So, but by doing that, by following it, you discover that, and then you sort of develop a sensitivity to what the actuality is that's being referred to by that.
But that also seems like kind of this dichotomizing between.
Yeah, if you think of it rationally, for sure. But the surfing of it and the taking advantage of it is essentially irrational. So you learn it by doing it, not by figuring it out. I'm never surfed, but I imagine it's actually literally a lot like surfing, because I imagine surfing is rather like that too. You learn how to do it by doing it, not by scratching your head and thinking about it.
But do you actually learn? Can you learn this skill or technique or art? Whatever it is?
It looks like learning. It can look like learning, I think, or progressive becoming familiar with it or something. I don't know what. I don't know if it's a learning in the sense of something you learn or acquire, but it's certainly something that can seem to grow in one's experience.
I've always seen it as some sort of serendipity.
Well, I think it is that. It's essentially a serendipity too. I mean, you can be exposed to things, even simplistic in learning, like acquiring information. You can be exposed to the information, but to sort of get it and assimilate it is kind of serendipity in a way.
It's always seemed to me a bit like a blind person trying to do a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, sure.
Seemingly impossible, but
Yeah.
you keep at it and you get it done.
Yeah, it's impossible, but don't let that stop you from doing it. Can't be done, but. Again, the inherent intelligence doesn't work by process, and it doesn't work by cause and effect, and it doesn't even work in time. So the very nature of the inherent intelligence looks a whole lot like serendipity.
But it does work.
It does work. It's the only thing that works. It does everything.
That's right.
And the inherent intelligence is the medium by which yoga occurs. It's the medium by which realization occurs.
Well, I mean, one of the downfalls is just, paying attention to what appears to occur as opposed to what is occurring.
Yeah, always.
And then
Sure.
try to make sense of it forth. And
Yeah.
rather than that it's just a completely spontaneous upwelling of
But the mind,
radiant presence in
Yeah.
every moment. of
Absolutely.
every,
but the mind is always quixotically trying to make sense of things. But all of that silliness is occurring in the context of this upwelling. So again, it's a coexistence, a non-dichotomatic coexistence.
Okay.
Spell that. Doing yoga is very, you know, it's interesting and kind of schizophrenic for the yogi, because the mind of the yogi is busy thinking it's doing yoga and figuring it out and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, the yoga is actually being done in spite of all that. Regardless of what the mind thinks it's doing or not doing, it thinks it's succeeding at or not succeeding at, thinks it's making sense of something or not.
It's like the little plastic steering wheel I had on my dad's car's dashboard.
Right. Exactly.
But it's not like all that thinking and rationalizing gets in the way of it?
No, not in the least. It doesn't matter.
I mean, there must be, I can't know it, but I mean, the mind, as you said, is part of the inherent intelligence.
Right.
And the only difference is the mind, for some reason or something, you know, maybe the inherent intelligence is, well, let's just have fun and have it do it, outside the box or outside of it.
Right.
And the inherent intelligence, it doesn't consider that a problem. And so in a way, the inherent intelligence is sort of like a movie producer. And the mind has given it the script, and it's okay, let's play with this and make that movie. I mean, something like that's happening.
Sure, yeah, sure. That's a way to say it.
I have this kind of semi-quasi-distinct memory of the moment I learned how to play a didgeridoo, or the moment I got the circular breathing. Basically, it was like I was trying, and then there was this flash of light, and then I knew how to do it.
Sure.
And I don't know what that was.
Well, all learning is like that. Probably when you learn to walk, it was probably like that. You know, when you learn to, if you learn to ski, if you learn how to, you know, I mean, anything you learn how to do, ride a bike's like that. I remember very distinctly. In fact, when I was a teenager, I learned how to ride a unicycle, and learning to ride a unicycle consists of a lot of falling down.
Yeah.
And you fall, and you fall, and you fall, and you fall, and all of a sudden one day you don't fall. And then you get it, and once you know what not falling feels like, then you can get that feeling anytime. And now I can ride, it's like riding a bicycle. I can ride a unicycle, but not because I know how to do it, but because I know how to do it. I couldn't possibly tell you what I'm doing, but I know what it feels like to do.
Douglas Adams described learning to fly.
Right, I love that, yeah.
Which is, you put one foot in the paper bag, and hold it about where your knees are, and then put your other foot in. And you're flying. If you don't drop the paper there.
One of his descriptions of learning to fly is you throw yourself at the ground and forget to land. In practical terms, there's a lot of tricks that make it very easy to engage the inherent intelligence, because there's some things that the logical mind is incapable of that are very obvious experientially. For example, textures. The experience of textures is something that is intrinsically irrational. The rational mind cannot assimilate it. It can pretend to, it can stand by and spin out narration, but experiencing a texture, you know, just feeling a texture in touch, or experiencing a texture in light, or or just a texture of thought. I mean, basically anywhere one finds the texture of experience itself, it's the inherent intelligence that is doing that, and the apparent structurality of texture is being done by, and according to the logic of, or the illogic of, if you want, the inherent intelligence. And the rational mind, there's no way it can't touch that, just cannot touch it. It can pretend to, it can start throw lots of words at it, but none of the words actually stick to anything. Or presence. You know, presence is another thing that's extremely obvious. And it's entirely unthinkable. There's no way that the personalized mind can deal with that. It can't touch it, you know. And so just noticing presence, this is present. Right away, you're outside the rational mind. Because presence is entirely irrational. It is not a shred of logic or process or anything else there. And it's completely obvious and blatant and accessible and blatant. And there's all these kinds of touch points that are very powerful to use in noticing, simply because they immediately and explicitly then the personal mind, the logical mind.
Another touch point is looking for the most subtle thing in your experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or even subtlety itself, or degrees of subtlety, is something that is irrational. Because right away you're essentially in texture.
Hey, Peter, there's a very important question here
What's that?
from online. Do you still know how to ride a unicycle?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know until I try.
So you don't have to.
Start trying.
It's like, ask me if I still know how to stand up. I don't know till I try. I'm sitting in this chair, I might have forgot, right? I might never stand up again. How can you tell? Anyway, it's about quitting time, so good night, everybody.
Thank you.